At any rate, we get the call. We go do the deed. And I remember it was the only time, I always wore those little square plates.
Real smart, Jimmy. Real smart.
Well, so that night I put on my big plates because I'm like, dude, this is going to rock. And in fact, and I don't know if these guys have ever talked about it, but I went to a couple of dudes who are, one of them is very well known. The other one is not. But and I said, look, man, if I get shot in the junk tonight, I want you guys to step on my throat. Promise me, because I don't want to go home like that. They both looked at me like, what the fuck? And I knew it was going to be on. And I don't know what compelled me to say that to those guys. Anyway, we got on the birds, and I remember coming into land, and your team leader, when you got hurt, was actually my troop chief that night.
Yeah.
Man, he's a stud.
He is a fucking stud of studs.
We were getting shot at pretty bad coming in. And, there was an argument about, and this is a tactical thing, but there were some arguments about tactics and how we should approach this whole thing. And I was a big one for being aggressive and, hitting them hard, which turned out, it was funny because I was in the hospital, I don't know, a month later, 3 weeks later. Some of the big high-ranking people came in to visit me and all that. They were talking about what a stupid decision to do. I'm like, well, actually, that was me.
Thank you. Appreciate the feedback. Yeah, my tactical decision.
Yeah. Anyway, we thought we were going to the Y, and we ended up on the X birds, and it was a handful. And so it took us a little bit of time to get moving. And the deal, man, hostage rescue is it's tough, and I think it's the hardest. And so you have to know who's who in the zoo. You can't just sling ammo around. You have to be smart. And so we started moving through these structures. I ended up getting to a place where we had to split up. So I took myself, one other shooter, and then Mike and his dog Remco, and we kept moving pretty good. We actually were headed almost south. Winds were out of the east. It's funny what you remember. And we ended up running into some civilians. We actually got into a little bit of a fight for a second. Kept moving, and then I saw something from one of the overhead assets that indicated, and I could look probably about 400 or 500 meters away. There were two dudes moving with some heavy stuff. I could see two dudes for sure. And we've been shot at by RPGs, at AKs, and of course PKMs. These guys were definitely heavy. And so I saw the light, and I was like, all right. We had just had a run-in with some civilians, kids actually, and I moved them out in the field, threw chem lights around them, and talked to the overhead asset that, hey, there's kids here as we're moving through. Because you know the deal. Those bad guys don't give a fuck. They just, if they're getting shot at, they're just going to spray. They don't care. So right after we set those kids down, that's when I saw the shooters. So we took off, and I didn't know they were shooters. I could just see dudes carrying heavy stuff. The environmentals were tough for nods. So I lined the dog up in the direction, kind of where the last place I saw him, and we were into the wind. So we were moving east, and I was watching the dog, and, I'd done this very thing more than once successfully. And knowing that the dog was going to give me a good indication and that the dog is quick and hard to shoot. So I basically made a bet that we could get to those guys, close on them, figure out who's who in the zoo while they're paying attention to the dog, and do what we need to do. Turns out that wasn't the case. We got to basically the edge of a ditch, kind of a little bit of a rise. I saw the dog's body language change. He got big, his tail went up. I knew it was going to be on probably 10 meters from the ditch. I could see him, and he starts moving quicker. And so I'm right on him. And then he gets to the top of the ditch, and boom, two big muzzle flashes out of an AK. And I watched the dog. It flipped him backwards and blew his jaw off. And he was a big fucking dog, man. And he blew backwards, and I started shooting the guy who had been shooting him. Because of the muzzle flash, I could see it definitely wasn't Bowe Bergdahl, And so I started filling him in. And his buddy, I remember yelling to Mike, get the dog back. I'm shooting him, and I was shooting with an MP7. It's funny, man. Heads don't move much when you hit him in the face with an MP7.
Well, maybe you shouldn't take
maybe
maybe don't take a toy gun.
It's so funny when I came back. I think it was one of the old Master Chiefs that worked up in RDT&E. He said, "Look, this is your report on the MP7." He's sticking with it. I'm like, no. Pretty funny.
All right, so you're plugging holes in a dude with an MP7.
His buddy lets us out with the AK, and the AK wins. And it doesn't hit me in the body armor, Andy. Those motherfuckers. I wore that body armor for all those years, and they could have had the decency to at least put one in me there. But no, it hit my femur, my right leg. I was just putting my weight down on it, and it blew right above my knee. It just blew my femur like out the back of my leg. And God damn, man. I remember, do you know a guy named Carlos Melita? He was a SEAL who got shot up in Panama. He's paralyzed. He was paralyzed. He won the Ironman for the, the wheelchair athletes. Yeah. He won that 5 times. Like and I remember asking him, what did it feel like when you got shot? And he goes, man, I felt like I was on fire. I remember. I'm like, Carlos said, oh yeah. And I was screaming. It was really messed up. I was worse than useless. I was actually a hazard just because I couldn't stop screaming. I don't know. Did you scream when you got shot?
No, I'm a little bit more than you.
I'm such a.
We've known that for years, man. Jimmy. Come on.
I couldn't stop. I'd reload my lungs with air, and I'm like, damn, can't stop screaming. It was funny. But honestly, at that point, I became a witness to the American spirit, and actually to my buddies. Like they just fucking did what we trained to do. Like there was nothing. Yeah. I mean, it was amazing. And of course, I got to talk to the TF-160 guys. Actually, the guys that were on that helo were at this function where, they have those annual balls where they bring their family, their wife. And I got to stand up there and say, look, man, imagine the worst night of your life. You're laying there bleeding to death in some place in another side of the world. And you have no doubt that these dudes are going to come get you. I mean, I didn't doubt it for a second. And I was that's a pretty significant security blanket if you really think about it. I was blown away. And what's funny, through this dog stuff, we've been doing these little fundraisers all over the country. And we did one recently in Wisconsin, jumping. Last year, this guy walks up to me at the fundraiser and I'm like, hey man, you look a little familiar. And he goes, yeah, last time I saw you, you were on the floor of my helicopter bleeding all over the fucking place. And I was like, holy shit. It's one of the crew chiefs. It was really cool. At any rate, those guys did come and get me. Go ahead.
How do you think it would have played out if the dog wasn't there and you utilized it the way that it did, or the way that you did? Would they have had the jump on you?
100%. Yeah. They saw us coming. They had to have seen us coming, or at least heard us. We're in a poppy field, and they had harvested it, and it was in July, so it was like walking on fucking potato chips. You know what I mean? It was loud.
Yeah, that's horrible.
And truthfully, it was a full moon, and there wasn't a lot of wind. Yeah. So you know the deal. It was not a good deal for us. I think had we not had the dog, we would most certainly be dead.
Okay.
Most certainly. And we're lucky. We're very lucky. And Remco, he paid the price for it. And so he's part of the catalyst behind, the whole Spikes K-9 fun thing.